Well, tell me what happened.
Okay, so my brother's telling, I asked him how his Thanksgiving went because he was invited to to the fellow who comes every day to take care of him a little bit,
Yeah.
also takes care of this lady. And she said that she wanted to have Thanksgiving dinner. So it meant that this fellow and Eddie would be going over to this lady's house who is in a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
and she's making dinner. So today I said to him, "What kind of dinner did she make?" He says, "Grandma," oh, he says, "Francie." He said,
Fancy, yeah.
he said, "What kind of turkey is it that is all mashed up?"
Or good.
I said, "What? How can you mash turkey?"
like, like,
Like puree?
like hash,
I said,
turkey hash.
so anyway, she made this food that he could not identify. And they had this Thanksgiving dinner, and she expected 10 people, and only 5 came.
Oh no,
And it
it's a
was
lot of food.
very disappointing to her. She had
Yeah.
worked so hard. Imagine
In a
working
wheelchair.
from a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, this fellow this Jose that helps Eddie, is a lot of help.
Right, right.
So
So how did Eddie get there?
he brought him. He uses Eddie's truck,
Okay,
and in exchange for that,
Are you recording this?
maybe.
Maybe.
it's
red
not a
light
very
sign.
interesting story. Stories go.
Oh.
Okay, Grandma, what do you remember? The very first memory that you have when you were a little girl.
My very first memory.
Ginger, if you want to be on the
It's
tape,
okay.
well, she's squeaking.
Okay. It's okay.
Come here, Ginger.
She
Babe,
sounds
it's
like
okay.
a little.
All right.
She
Hey,
sounds like
Ginger.
a bird.
Hi.
It's okay to have her. It's more natural. Go ahead.
She.
Except for the
My first
squeaking.
memory is waking up one day in my stepmother's house, and I'm about 2.5, 2.5, and I trying to get on my shoes and lace them up. There was these high tops, and I
Uh-huh.
was trying to lace up these high tops.
What color? Do you remember?
Matter?
Were they like leather?
Yes, they were leather, and I guess that must have been one of my first walking kind of shoes or
Uh-huh.
something. And at that time, they really tried to, what they thought was protect your ankles and
Mm.
everything by these hard tops. And it was all laced up,
Mhm.
the little hook things.
What about memories of your brothers and sisters? Brothers and sister.
Not at that time.
Not that time, just after that, like growing up.
In growing up,
What were all the different roles that you guys all had?
well, when we started in having first we lived in a rooming house after my father separated, and that was a very unusual house with a bathroom down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
The typical rooming house where you cooked on a kitchen, like a plate, not a regular stove.
Like a hot plate.
Well, it was a few of them, just burners. And my sister and I slept in one room, and my brother and my father all slept in the next room. They had 2 rooms. And it was a very weird kind of a rooming house where different people lived in the rooms. And the woman that lived above us, supposed to have taken, to take care of us. She would come in every day and cook our meals. Well, one day, when we went to the market, I asked her if she would buy watermelon. I hadn't even had any watermelon, and she said, "With what your father pays me, how can I get watermelon?" she said, you can take care of it yourself.
How?
How old were you then?
So I was about 6.5, 7.
How are you going to do it?
So she wasn't doing it anymore. So my brother said, well, you'll have to go to the store and you'll have to buy this and this and this and bring it home and I don't know, we sort of got dinners and food together that way. What was bad was that we didn't have a refrigerator,
Uh-huh.
and so everything that we bought we had to eat, and we had no way of keeping it, you know, and that was the hard part. So then
So you would,
not very long after that, we moved
uh-huh.
across town. Actually, we moved to,
West Adams, wasn't it?
well, Jefferson, and there we rented a house. And what I thought was real fun was my brother was buying beds. You know, he bought these iron beds, you know,
Uh-huh.
I don't know what they call them now, but they're irons with just posts,
Uh-huh.
and
Like,
they have a name
Wrought
for
iron?
no, like,
not wrought iron, just regular
yeah.
iron. And anyway, he bought the same beds for each one of us, a single bed, and Jenny and I had a room together, had one room. And I guess in that bedroom, he made a double bed because we were to sleep together. And, you know, I was always afraid of the dark
Uh-huh.
because of the experience that my stepmother made with me, you know. I told you, didn't I?
No.
What?
Well, my stepmother didn't want me to leave the house.
Mhm.
She wanted me to stay with her. So at the time of the divorce, she would have me from that time on. And so she would go down into the basement and she'd make all kinds of noises. And I was very frightened. It was a scary thing because it woke me out of my sleep. And I'd hear all these noises.
You think she was doing it to try to scare you? To keep you at home?
To keep me with her,
Uh-huh.
because when I would run in and I'd say, I'm so afraid, and what is that terrible noise? And she would say that my father made it, my father's doing that.
Oh my goodness.
And so when I saw my father not living in the house but a ways, and he said, Francie, come here. And I ran. I was so frightened of him. Oh, I was so frightened. I never had that reason to be frightened of him because he really was very loving.
Yeah.
And but I ran and then he said, "Don't run away from me. Let me talk to you." And I said, "You make noise at night. You do all these things." And he said, "No, I don't. I never would do that. I love you, you know." And it makes me cry. He was such a sweet man.
Yeah.
And then he says, "Come with me, and I have a place for you. I have a room for you." And I left just like that. I never went back to my stepmother's house.
It was easy enough.
Wasn't that
Easy,
funny?
yeah. Easy
And-
decision.
And my father, he, at the divorce, he was given the table and chairs, dining room table and chairs, which were ours from my mother. And he had it when he was married.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave him that and me.
It's amazing to me how Grandma turned out so wonderful. With the kind
With
of
that.
childhood she had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so then we moved into this house, and the beds didn't come, and we only had this dining room set, and
Was that on 10th Avenue?
no, this was on 6th Avenue,
Oh, 6th Avenue.
and so
But there you were there a long time, weren't you?
no, not
Is-
too long.
Isn't that where I met you? Where you were living? Huh?
No, we moved from there to 5th Avenue.
Oh, 5th Avenue.
And then I moved to 42nd Street,
Oh,
and that's when I knew you.
oh.
Anyway, so
Oh, you were lucky that Grandma knew me. What would have happened to you?
I know.
I was just waiting to have these children. Anyway, what happened was when it rained so hard and we didn't have the beds,
Mm-hmm.
so I said, what are we going, what are you going to do? When you're a child, you just think this is going to be some new experience. Well, I always loved new experiences. I loved having something happen new,
Mhm.
So Sammy said, well, don't worry, you will sleep on the floor. And we'll all get something like the blankets, roll in a blanket, and we'll sleep on the floor. It was like the happiest day of my life, sleeping on the floor. I mean, such an experience,
Right.
And so my chore was always to cook and to manage the money in the house.
So how much money did you have to go
We had
shopping?
$1 a day, and in that $1 a day, I had to be sure we had milk in the morning, and we had to have bread for the day, and so I bought a loaf of bread every day, and we had, the strange thing, I never thought of peanut butter. Maybe they didn't have peanut butter then, but they had jelly.
Uh-huh.
And then we had dinner to have enough things for dinner. So I used to go to the butcher shop. It's all Jewish stores. I bought 50 cents with a soup meat, which would be a bone and like a shank bone
Uh-huh.
with the it's called kniefleisch with the meat around it,
What is it called?
like a kniefleisch. It's meat with the around here, and then they had they put in milts and lung, which was milk and lung,
Uh-huh.
and stuff that I wouldn't want to eat now, and maybe a piece of chopped meat. And when I
All for 50 cents.
and then I'd go to the greengrocer. This was just vegetables, and and everybody knew me because I was the only one that would go out that was so little
Uh-huh.
to buy all the groceries.
How old were you then?
Well, I was about 7, 8.
Oh my goodness.
And so I'd go to the market, and when I went to the meat market, there was a grocery on the other side, and I could get the bread there, because they had the rye bread. And it was fun because it was all Jewish
Did you know?
stores, and everybody knew one another.
Right, and everyone knew you.
And they knew the families.
Uh-huh.
And I knew their families. And then I'd go to greengrocer, then he would give me, I'd say 5 cents worth of vegetable greens. He would make it such a big bundle that I could hardly carry it. I could hardly carry the groceries home. Then
How did you get them home? And what did you have some kind of cart or something?
No, I had to carry them home.
Just in bags.
And the groceries, and the green groceries was in a newspaper, wrapped in a newspaper, and then I'd have to put it in a bag, then take it home. I'd take and open up the bag, the greengrocer, and in it was like a couple of potatoes, an onion, carrots, celery, and all this stuff. And I would decide, this will be for my soup. This will be for my roast. Then I would take the meat package and go like that. Oh, this chunk.
Who taught you how to make the soup and the roast?
This is something that I got a little bit from that lady that used to come to our house when she was agreeable.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And so I had this wonderful wealth of stuff that I
Yeah.
thought, I had all this stuff. Well, it didn't always work out real proportionate, because what I would warm the food, I'd cook it, from the time I got it home till dinner. Then the Sammy and George and Eddie would come in from work,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all starved. And Jenny would come home whenever during the day. I mean, sometimes she came right after school, and sometimes she didn't. And Jenny cleaned. She'd rather clean than cook. We had our jobs.
Right.
And iron. We both had an iron. But anyway, so what happened was that they would sit down and I would warm up the food. And I would put it on the table. The time I sat down, there's hardly anything left.
Because they just ate it
They
up.
were so hungry.
Wow.
They were so hungry, and there was so little.
Yeah.
If I made a chicken, it was like 6 people had to eat on that chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how much could you have?
Right.
I was always hungry.
Wow. You went to bed feeling
You're
hungry?
still always hungry.
Okay, Grandpa's turn.
Okay.
Grandpa, what you were telling me the other day about when you remember being in L.A., coming to L.A. from Buffalo. You don't remember anything from Buffalo?
Not very much, no.
He was too young.
I was only about less than 7. I don't remember. I really don't remember Buffalo very well.
So you came to L.A.
But I remember we came to LA on train, and my mother told me to tell the conductor that I guess if you're 7, you had to pay more. So I had to tell him I was 6 or something like that. I remember something like that. Anyhow, so that worked out. And we got to my grandma's house. I'll tell you what I remember. That was very traumatic. When I got there, I picked up the newspaper. I was a very good reader even at that time. And the article I read was about people turning to stone. And it made me so frightened, and I felt so bad about it, and I worried about that. How they exaggerate these things in the newspapers.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember that article, people turning to stone. And I remember Grandma's house. It was no hallway. On one side there was 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 bedrooms with a bathroom in between 2 of them. But you had to go from one bedroom to the next to get to the back. And the other side was a living room and dining room and sitting room or something. Then behind that was a kitchen with another little half bath.
Uh-huh.
With a half bath. Because that's where I spent most of my time. I told you about the time I came home from school with a bad case of diarrhea.
Right.
Yeah.
I did hear that.
And my grandma got so mad at me. My mother, of course, was understood, and she cleaned me up and everything. But the grandma thought it was all my fault.
Oh dear.
She was not a very nice person. But I had in that house there was my Uncle Shikey, who wasn't married, and what was the other uncle?
Ruby.
Ruby, Uncle Ruby, and Auntie Rosie, and who else was there?
Charlotte.
Huh?
You had a Charlotte.
No.
Aunt Charlotte?
No,
Oh, I
I
thought
don't
it was.
remember who else there was.
And your brothers?
Huh?
And you and your brothers?
Oh, yeah, Harold was.
No,
I mean,
Harold
Stephen-
wasn't even
Stephen,
born yet.
I mean, Milt was with me too. He was just 2 years younger than me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Did you see, do you see the picture of me and Milt?
And Harold wasn't even born yet.
No, he was born here not here, but in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
And in Los Angeles, I remember it seemed like my mother and father moved about every 6 months or so to a new place in Boyle Heights.
Why?
I have no idea. But I remember some of the houses. I remember going to school the first day, and they gave me an intelligence test. They gave me pennies to count and things like that.
Right.
And I started counting them, and she says, "No, you can touch them. You know, not touch them." Anyhow, I remember things like that. But I remember having a bicycle, learning to ride, and really enjoying it. And then it was stolen in Boyle Heights. And
I remember you teaching me how to ride a bike
yes, I remember
on
that.
my 7th birthday
That
in
was
Lake
something.
Arrowhead.
Lake
I
Arrowhead,
couldn't
right,
stand it.
yeah.
I had to go in.
Oh, you didn't want to watch?
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't stand it because you kept falling and then you'd get back on. And falling and get back on.
And we were with Michael Rabo.
Yeah.
Michael Rabo.
Yeah, I
You remember?
him, yeah.
And I thought that you were still holding on,
Oh, yeah.
and you would just let go.
Yeah.
And then I think I ran into a big garbage
I remember
can.
that.
That's when I think I went in.
Yeah.
But that was it. Finally, it was Katie's bike that we got with blue chip stamps.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
If you remember that part, that's what I remember. So, what about things that you remember with your brothers?
Brett, yeah.
Well, Milt had a hobby of collecting stamps. That was, I guess he was about 10 or 11, and I was 12 or 13. And I was very mischievous.
Yeah,
Uh,
So you did all that dirty tricks.
yeah. I want to hear about that.
You heard about the dirty
I want to hear about them again, though.
Well,
Linda needs to hear.
Yeah, I just need
I, you know, at that time we had Model T Fords.
Uh huh.
And the Model T Ford used 4 individual coils for each spark plug. I don't know if you ever saw what they look like. They were a little box with a vibrator on them, and they would make the spark. And I would go and take them out to see a car, and I'd take one out, take it home. And I'd take them apart, and they had very fine wire, and I'd use a fine wire. And I would get another one, and I'd hook it up to a battery, and it would give quite a spark and quite a shock.
Okay.
And I put the wire across a little alley or someplace, and some women would walk along, and I'd turn around and give them a shock as they walked past the wire. And that was terrible. And then, you know what calcium carbide is?
No.
That's what makes acetylene gas when you add water to it.
Okay.
It's carbide. I was able to buy that. I don't know how I could buy it, but they had selling me stuff like that. A 10 or 12-year-old kid. Anyhow, I put it in a can with a spark plug, put the cover on the can, put it in the middle of the street, run a wire from the spark plug to the coil, and a car would come by. I push the button, the can would explode underneath the car.
That you were mischievous.
Huh? Oh, another thing I did, I learned how to make keys, skeleton keys. So I had a set of skeleton keys. I'd go down the alley, I'd take the locks, take them all off, and move them around different people's garages, so that they had the wrong lock in their garage. I never saw what happened as a result, but those are some of the dumb things I did when I was a kid.
That is too funny.
Yeah.
That is
and
funny.
I made gunpowder. Yeah. I get sulfur and charcoal and see, what was the other ingredient? I forget now.
I don't know whether this is going to work out so well for the future generations.
Yeah. I'd make gunpowder and we'd have fun lighting it and make a nice fire. Yeah. And I tried to make...
Now, was this with your brothers? You did this with your brothers?
No, with my friends.
Your friends?
Yeah. Well, I had Louis Glazer and Albert Korstein were my friends. And I remember I learned to play chess with Albert. We went to the library, looked up in the encyclopedia the moves, and that's how we learned to play chess.
Taught yourself?
Chess together, huh?
You taught yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, but I looked it up a lot. And, we built clubhouses and made boats out of wood. a good childhood, but
What
not,
what was Los Angeles like then?
well, this is Boyle Heights, and it was all Jewish.
It's like a
neighborhood.
different world.
All Jewish.
My
neighborhood.
father didn't even feel like we should associate with anybody that lived in Boyle Heights
Yeah, but it was fine.
Why, Grandma?
because it was like a different. He
A
felt
ghetto.
it was like foreigners,
Like
you know.
a kiddo, I guess.
Actually, we had to move to the west side. It's like people that lived in Adams was not good enough for the west side. It was like strange.
Right.
It was.
So-
We had people had very strange ideas then.
So what, Grandpa? What the area that you lived in was nicer
Oh,
or
no.
not as nice?
It was all right. I had nothing.
Well, it's houses,
the
but
houses were
but
nice,
but it's just that it
fine.
was. It's like you compare.
Honey, you were never in Boyle Heights. So
I was.
When were you in Boyle Heights?
Well, I was there. I didn't live there,
No,
Right.
but I was there. I mean,
You should
various
sit here.
times.
I used to go to the store and get sauerkraut, and they sell it by bulk
In a box, in a
paper,
carton.
paper carton. And on the way home, I cut a hole in the bottom of the box and suck out the juice.
What? Well, what was Los Angeles like? You know, in terms of the
The area.
the area. Like, where did
Population?
the community end, and where did the beach begin? How did you get to the beach?
Oh, I very seldom got to the beach. No, see, Boyle Heights was, you know where Boyle Heights is? Or don't you know?
Not
It's
really.
The east.
That's on the east side, east of the town. East of
It's
town.
like right now. It's all Mexican
It's
people,
all Mexican now.
and before it was all Jewish.
Uh huh.
And the same thing happened in West Adams. Was a very high class neighborhood, you know, at that time that we were growing up.
Well, what I mean is from what I understand, the buildings in Beverly Hills and
Well,
West LA and
I didn't know anything about any of that. I
It
got
was
a
like
job.
a different world.
When I was about 18, I got a job working as a radio repairman for a fellow in Boyle Heights. And I would drive the truck around, but I didn't have a driving license. And we lived, at that time I think I lived in around Temple Street or something, I don't remember. Anyhow, one morning driving to work, I stopped at the DMV and got my driving license. And so that day the boss asked me, how come I'm so late to work? And I didn't say anything. I told him I was late, I don't know. He says, do you have a driver's license? And I did have that.
just that day.
Yeah, and then I got another job in Boyle Heights at a different radio store. Two brothers that had a grocery store on the side, and in front was a radio where they didn't sell it. It was radio repair, and I used to listen to classical music. I didn't have that much to do with repair radios, but I do remember one thing: the telephone was a payphone on the wall, and instead of putting a nickel in, I could hit the bottom of it with a telephone book and get it to work. So you'd have to put nickels in.
Did you hear about the mischievous things that he would do? Shock the people and all that?
It was.
It's very funny.
Anyhow,
Um,
I'm going pretty fast, but
well, yeah. But what, Grandpa, what do you think is the most important invention in your lifetime?
oh, the transistor. Oh, without a question, without the transistor, there wouldn't be any of this, computers or anything like that. I think that is the most amazing thing that ever happened.
So, what were the first transistors that you worked with? What they look like?
Oh, the transistors, little tiny things about this big with three little pins coming out of them. But, I was in my store and I was working with tubes. I was an expert on tube theory. I knew tube theory inside out. And then transistors came in, and besides, I sold my business at that time, and I didn't have much to do with transistors. Yeah, I built some kits using them, and I'm familiar with them.
Right.
But after the transistor, then they made the integrated circuits where they put them all on one board instead of individual transistors. They
Right.
got them smaller and smaller. Now look at, well, this is not a watch, but some of the watches, it's all a little integrated.
Right.
Yeah, but I can't imagine what this would be like if they could never have computers with tubes.
What about transportation, or commercial flight, or anything like that?
Well, that